Arrays are a very special type of variable. They allow us to house and control several variables at the same time. What happens is it works almost like a box of eggs, where every egg inside the box, it's a variable or a movie clip or an object, and then we address them by their position within that box of eggs. So every position within the box of eggs will receive a number starting from 0 and all the way to the length of the actual box, however many items we have inside the box. So the length of an array is however many items we have pushed into a box. Every array starts counting from 0, as you can see in this graphic. Basically, I have put 2 asteroids into this array. Every time I add a new array onto the stage, whether I do it when I do it dynamically through code, what happens is that asteroid is placed on the stage, and then I will push it into the array called asteroids, let's say. And so when I do that, what happens is each one of these gets moved up onto that array, and I am basically packing every space within the array. Now, what this affords me, what this gives me is the ability to go and browse through my array at any given time through a for loop and check conditions for my entire movie. And so I can quickly say, if any of these things in my array is doing something, then make it do something else. So for example, let's say I am pushing these asteroids to make them move across the screen down on the y-axis. If I don't want them to be on the screen once they have passed the bottom portion of the stage, meaning I don't see them anymore, then I want to remove them from the movie, because the more of these things that are on the screen and the more things are moving on the screen, the slower my CPU will become. So when I have something that I'm not seeing, when I have something that has moved on to outside of the stage area, then good practice, good coding practice says that you should remove it altogether from the program. And so to do that, it is helpful to have an array that allows me to check all of the items at once really quick and see if anything within the array has met that specific condition. And if it does, then remove it off the stage. So let me go ahead and block this and turn it off for just a second. And let me open up the code that I had written for this really quick so that I can walk you through this. So as you can see, I have a movie called Asteroid, which we had used in the previous movie, and we had shared it for ActionScript. That means, remember from the previous movie, when we create the movie Asteroid, basically we click on the Advanced tab, and then we shared it for ActionScript by clicking here. When we did that, basically whatever name you gave to the actual movie clip will become the name of that class. And like I said before, all of the things that belong to the movie clip class will be attached to that asteroid movie. So just simply clicking on that, export for ActionScript will activate all this for you. You don't have to change anything here. These names should match so that when you go onto your code, you know exactly what's calling what from within the code. So let me go ahead, and so you'll notice also one of the first things that you need to look at in the library to make sure that your items have been shared for ActionScript is this area here, the linkage. And if you see that there's a name there, then you know that this will be active if you call it within the code. And so that's basically what I did here. I created a variable called Asteroid, and I assigned a class to it of class Asteroid, this class. So basically this variable here is waiting for me to add one of these movie clips into it. I just didn't do it here. I haven't done it. And the reason for that is because I will do it through a timer. Timer, it's another part of the code that allows us to create, it's basically creates an event that will be using a clock, and the clock starts whenever you run the program. As soon as you start running the program, then that clock starts counting, or as soon as you call an event to start the clock starts counting, and that timer will give you a specified number of seconds, or milliseconds actually. It counts in milliseconds, and then after that, those milliseconds have been met, then it will call a function or it will do something. So in this case, I have created then that variable, and I will add those asteroids to the timer. You'll see how I do that in just a second. Then after I created the asteroid, I created a variable called asteroids with an S, and that is an array. That's the type of variable that this asteroid is going to be. The array is what will hold all of the asteroids that I'm adding onto the stage. So this one will house the asteroid itself. The array, the variable asteroids will house all of the asteroids that I am adding. And in this case, I simply state I want a new array for that, please. So this is how I create this basically egg box. And then dynamically, I will be adding all of the asteroids that I create on line 5 will be added into it down here in the code. You'll see where. The next line of code, line 7, basically is the declaration of the timer. And the timer is a variable, as you can see. And then it's of type timer. So that is the actual class type for that variable, timer. And then I create a new timer for it. You can have as many timers as you want within any movie clip. In this case, I just need one. And these two values inside the declaration of the timer, where it says new timer, 1500 is however milliseconds, how often do I want that timer to get activated? And this says every 1500 milliseconds, which equals 1.5 seconds. So every 1.5 seconds, I want to do something. This timer will happen every 1.5 seconds. So as soon as I start the movie, every 1.5 seconds, this timer will click, basically saying, hey, timer, timer, timer. And so whatever that timer does, it's gonna happen. And the 0 after that says loop infinitely. So if you only want this timer to be active for once, then you would change that for a 1 or twice. You would change it for a 2 and so on and so forth. A value of 0 on any timer declaration on the second value indicates that that timer will loop forever until you turn off the movie. So that's what that line of code is. The next line is basically that timer variable that I created, I added a listener to it. And this listener basically is going to be listening for that timer event, for whatever timer I created. Is going to be listening for that timer. And when the timer happens, which is every 1500 milliseconds, then it's going to call that function, create asteroid. So basically these two lines of code, line 7 and line 8, the line 7 declares the timer that will be happening every 1.5 seconds. The second line, line 8, is listening for that timer, and every time the timer clicks, then it will call a function called create asteroid. And we'll see what create asteroid does down here. Then after that, I need to get that timer started. So I need to click that timer. I need to make sure that it starts counting, and it starts counting whenever I tell it to start. In this case, since it's at the very top of the code, as soon as the code starts, that timer will start. As soon as the movie clip starts, then the timer will start. As soon as I test my movie, the timer will start. Then we did this code before for the stars that we added in the previous movie. And then over here, I am going to go walk through the create asteroid function. So the function create asteroid is waiting for an event of type timer event. That's what's calling it. And remember, this call to the function and the actual name of the function need to match. Then what is happening inside that function? Well, to the variable asteroid that I had declared on line 5, I add a new asteroid. So that means bring in one of those movie clips from the library. That's what that does. So it brings one asteroid. Okay, and it places it into that asteroid movie. Then I tell it to go on the x-axis in a random place on the horizontal axis. So I'm saying place the asteroid, its x value, place it whatever you want within the movie width. That's basically what I'm saying. Then the next one says place the asteroid at its negative value on the y-axis, which means the negative height of that asteroid places it right above the fold, right up here up on top of the stage, right above it, because it's basically looking at how high is this. Well, let's say it's 100 pixels, then place it at negative 100. Remember, this corner here is your 0, 0 point with reference to the stage. So if I go past that point towards the top, it's negative values. If I go down below, it's positive values. If I go to the left of it, it's negative x values. If I go to the right of it, it's positive x values. So If I place it at -100, I'm basically saying, do me a favor and place it up here somewhere on top of the stage. And it places it right on top of it, right above it. So with that said, then that's where my movie clips will be added on the y-axis and randomly on the x-axis based on line 21. Then I am giving it some kind of a scaling value, random scaling value, saying math random, which gives me any value between 0 and 1. And then I add to that value 0.2. So the possible range of values for the scale x, meaning the size on the x-axis of my asteroid movie that I'm adding, will be anywhere between 0.2 if this provides a 0, or 1.2 if this provides a 1, or anything in between. The next line of code matches the value of scale x for scale y, and that's because I assigned scale y to be the exact same thing as scale x, which I just created here. Then I add a variable called SPD. This is a variable that will only, it's almost like a property that I added to this movie clip that I'm adding, and that is a random variable. I don't have to declare it up here if I am adding it within a function. But if it would be good practice to actually declare it up here, and that's just a number. This would be a number. So I should add a line of code up here somewhere, let's say right below the I that I use for my counter. I'm going to say variable SPD of type number. And I don't have to add a value to it up there because I am adding it over here. Okay, so the variable SPD that has been attached to asteroid is gonna house a number, and that SPD is basically what I'm gonna be using for the speed of how fast my asteroid will be moving down the screen, because that's the intent, that I'm gonna be moving those asteroids as I add them up here, that they move down on the stage. How do I do that? Well, I add a listener to that particular asteroid that I'm adding. I add a listener to it, and that listener is going to be listening for an enter frame. And as I've explained, enter frame is the event that happens all the time. So if I want motion on the screen, if I want something to be moving or to be checked all the time, enter frame is the event that I want to use. So I am checking constantly for that enter frame. And so it's going to say, okay, since I'm checking constantly, then go ahead and every time you enter the frame, move the asteroid. So I am adding that listener, and it's going to call that function for that particular instance of the asteroid. Okay. Remember, this function is being called every 1.5 seconds. So every 1.5 seconds, I will have one instance of asteroid being added to the stage, and all of these things will be applied to that instance. And then, because it's calling this move asteroid function, then it's going to start moving down. Move asteroid will be this one down here. Then, in order to check to see if any of the items inside any of those items that I'm adding have passed the bottom of the stage, then that's where the array comes in. And so the array, in order to push these items, any of these items that I'm adding into the array, I have this line of code down here on line 29. I am pushing the movie asteroid that I just created into the array asteroids. So every time I add one of those asteroids onto the stage, by going through this function every 1.5 seconds, I push that instance that I just added onto the array. And so now I can check on the array to see if anything inside the entire array has reached the bottom of the stage. So then I obviously add the child to the stage. Basically, I'm actually adding the object onto the stage. This line right here, line 28, adds the item from the library onto the stage. And since I had already declared it here, all I have to say is please add it to the stage. Okay, so this move asteroid function, what does it do? Well, the move asteroid function is being checked constantly, all the time. And so what is that going to do? Well, it's going to say, okay, so what is my event target for that function, for move asteroid? My event target is any of the asteroid instances that I have added. Each one of them has that listener attached to it, and each one of them is independently calling that move asteroid function. All of them, as they get added, they all keep on calling. So if you have 10, there will be at any time 10 movie clips calling that function. And all of these values are specific to each one of the instances that you have been adding. So basically what it's saying, okay, asteroid 1, well, all of these belongs to asteroid 1, and asteroid 2, it also has all of these, and they're not the same values. They all could be random because we have a lot of random values in here. So what's going to happen is we're push them all into the array to check each one of them independently. So how do we do that? Well, move asteroid. We call that movie clip through the listener. Now it's being checked all the time. What's the first thing it does? It starts moving my event target, my asteroid, whatever asteroid is calling the function, is being moved plus equal. Remember, that's an assignment equal value. So it's basically saying add to the y value of asteroid, add whatever value of SPD it has, which was generated randomly here. And as you can see from that equation, math random, anywhere between 1 and 0, times 2, lowest possible value would be 0 times 2 equals 0 plus 10 equals 10. So that is the lowest possible value. Highest possible value, 1 times 2 equals 2 plus 10, 12. So those are the high and low possible values that I get for this equation here. So it's going to say move move whatever is being called at the time, whatever the event target happens to be, add those to the y-axis. So you're going to say, okay, so the first asteroid is going to start moving at a specific speed because that's random. They will all be moving at different speeds. Then I have a for loop here through which I check the position of every asteroid in that array. So as I am adding them, I go through this for loop every single time. And it's going to say for I equals 0, it's going to reset the counter. Remember, we use that I over here as well. We use the counter. We can reuse it as many times as we need. We just reset it and we're going to say, okay, for I equals 0, while I is less than the length of my array. Remember, the length of the array is how many items I have in the array. Then I++ start increasing on a place by place. Since the first value of I is 0, then it's going to check the very first position of my array and it's going to say, where are you? And it's going to say, if that position of the array, if asteroids I, mind the syntax on this, if that position of the array, if the y value of that particular asteroid is greater than the bottom of the stage, which is the height of the stage, then remove the listener, move asteroids from it, remove the child display object, so meaning remove the actual movie clip from the stage, and splice my array, meaning take that particular movie clip out of the array so that you basically occupy the space. Splicing, that you clarify the space. So splicing the array basically removes whatever item is being removed from the array, and then whatever is after that space gets moved down one space if necessary. But in this case, because we are adding up, we're checking them all in order, what is always going to be moved is the last thing on the array, always. So we don't have to worry too much about the functionality of that. But in reality, what happens is in splicing, this is what happens when you splice an array. Say, for example, if I were to remove this guy from the array, that gets removed and this guy moves down. That's what a splice is. And then because I am moving that display object, this on line 37 right here, because of that line, I am basically removing this instead of moving it off to the side of the stage. I'm literally deleting it from the stage. That removes the item from the stage, and there you have it. Then you would have, that wouldn't be on the stage anymore, so the computer is not calculating for that anymore. Your program is not calculating for that. So let me go ahead and grab all of these items here and move them to the side so that they don't get on the way. And let's test this movie to see what it does. When I run it, I see my stars, and then every 1.5 seconds, I should see asteroids moving down the screen, placed at random spaces. So how do I know that they're being removed from the stage? Well, let me elongate this. And you'll notice that when they get passed down the bottom of the stage, they disappear. You will also notice that they get placed just up from the fold of the stage. because that's what I told it to do. Place it at the negative value of whatever the height of that movie clip happens to be, and that's where they get placed. So these movie clips will be added every 1.5 seconds. They move across the screen and then they disappear, because I don't want them floating around into the nether over here and then slowing down my machine. That's something I don't want. So you'll notice, let me retest it again, and you'll see that they disappear as soon as they get to the bottom of the stage. So that is how arrays work. How we get the ability to check through every space on the array by using this nomenclature here. And as we do, then we determine if a condition is met. And if the condition is met, then we can do something about it. And basically, this happens constantly. It's constantly checking for every spot on the array. Makes it really fast. And like I said before, for loops stop the playback of the movie for fractions of a second and execute whatever code is in there. So you don't even notice it. But this is happening constantly, and it's checking for all the items within that array. Makes life easier. And also, good introduction to the timers, so that you can use them if you want to add things at specific times. This is one good way to use timers. Basically, is to declare the timer, add a timer event to the timer, so that you actually can call a function through whenever that timer happens, and then get that timer started so that you can basically make use of it. By the way, just like you can start a timer, you can also stop it by saying stop, open, close parentheses, semicolon after the name of the timer. So it's extremely functional when it comes to doing things that you do through time, especially for games. Or if you have music or sounds that you're loading at specific times, then this is one way to control it through the use of timers.